Broadcasting from the Hip Hop Weekly studios, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Civic Cipher, where our mission is to foster allyship, empathy, and understanding. I am your host, Ramses Ja. Big shout out to my man Q Ward, who is out of town making history with the history makers, but have no fear, because this week we got something special in store for you. Longtime friend of the show, Ami Horowitz, joins us. And for those that don't know, Ami is an American conservative documentary filmmaker and activist. He is the writer, producer, and director of Ami on the Loose, a satirical short film series. He's also the host of the recent documentary, The Art of War, a look into the practices of the IDF. And I know that if your ears perked up, because Ami is a conservative activist, have no fear. That is intentional. Ami is a dear friend of mine and a dear friend of the show. And while we don't agree on much, politically speaking, we certainly have spirited conversations. And we feel, as often as we're able to have these conversations, that you might find some meaning in the exchange. Today, we're specifically going to focus on sort of how to have conversations with people that disagree with you, in the spirit of finding some common ground and moving forward together as human beings. And so welcome back to the show, Ami. Appreciate you taking the time to hang out with us again.
Man, it's always a pleasure. It's an honor to always be with you. And yeah, look, you and I have these spirit debates on air, and we also have them personally over dinner.
Indeed. Indeed.
And no, this is a really important topic because we're living in such a fractured society. And I think that's difficult for both sides, frankly. It's not just one side being closed-minded, the other side being open. I know each side wants to pretend that is. You know, my friends on the right go, we're open, and the other side isn't, and vice versa. And it's really not true. It's very difficult for all sides to have real conversations about real important issues.
Well, that's exactly what we're going to do today. But before we get there, it is time for some Ebony Excellence. So today's Ebony Excellence, we're shouting out the ancestors. So this comes from Black Enterprise. The Nottoway Plantation, a monument to Southern grandeur built on the backs of enslaved people, has been destroyed by a fire that raged for nearly 40 hours. Beginning late May 15th, the inferno gutted the 160-year-old estate turned resort, once the largest antebellum mansion remaining in the South. I know a lot of folks already know about this story, but we're just getting to it, so bear with me. Staff at the renamed Nottoway Resort noticed smoke in the south wing on the night of May 14th. The fire quickly spread through the 64-room, 53,000 square foot property, including a 3-story rotunda. It had been listed on the National Register of Historic Places since 1980. Despite efforts from multiple departments, the structure was lost. While the Iberville Parish government grieves the destruction of what it calls an economic cornerstone, others see poetic justice in the ashes of the plantation that never meaningfully confronted its legacy of slavery. Built in 1859 by sugar magnate John Hampton Randolph, the estate was powered by the forced labor of more than 150 enslaved people, a fact often glossed over in tourist brochures. While the Iberville Parish government bemoans the loss as a blow to the local economy and a piece of national significance, others aren't mourning. For many, the destruction feels less like a tragedy and more like a reason to celebrate. And this from the Atlanta Black Star. A fallen tree during a storm destroyed the Fort Branch Confederate Museum in North Carolina, leaving the building a total loss. The museum was immediately closed due to insufficient insurance to cover rebuilding costs. While the Historical Society seeks donations, social media has had other reactions, many noting the destruction alongside other recent events involving Confederate landmarks, karma, or ancestral justice. So shout out to the ancestors looking out one time. Okay, Ami, before we get into this, I want to make sure that the part of this conversation that I want our listeners to take away from it is well established. So I will go first in saying that Ami is a person that first came to my attention through social media. And this was years ago now, but, he is a media personality, and he's a filmmaker. He's a journalist. And, your algorithm serves up the things that you're into, and as a journalist and as a media personality, Ami was one such individual. He ended up reaching out, and we said, let's have a conversation on the radio. And in short order, I think that we both, I don't want to speak for you, but I think that we both made a decision that we are going to be brothers earlier than we do with perhaps most people. Certainly, I'll say that for myself. And I'm going to love this man right here, Ami Horowitz, no matter what. No matter what he says out of his mouth, it infuriates me to no end. I'm going to love him. And in doing that, I have learned that this is a beautiful human being. And a lot of the things, a lot of the anguish and a lot of the misunderstandings that I associate with people on the right, Ami is a living testament to the fact that I can't paint with too broad a stroke, right? So are there people who are racist? Are there people who are calloused? Are there people who are unkind, mean-spirited on the right? Absolutely. But I can't paint with too broad of a stroke, nor can I say that the ideology in and of itself is only for people who fit those descriptions, because I don't associate any of those things with Ami. I believe Ami is a man who was put on this planet to love people. And the filter through which he views the world is a conservative filter, which is fundamentally different from the filter through which I view the world. Now, I wanted to say that. And I also want to get your response to that. But right on the heels of that, I definitely want you to talk about your recent film, because you're here on the show, you're promoting your film, and I want to make sure you have the grounds to do so. So please.
Yeah, look, that first of all was a lovely introduction, maybe one of the nicest introductions I have ever had, without written by my mother, and probably nicer than what she would have written also. Look, it has been, to be your friend has been a real pleasure, and also something of a learning experience for me. And I think that what you said about how you viewed people on the right, I certainly had some of that viewpoint for people on the left. And I think that not just because we disagree on things, it doesn't mean malice. Right? People
Sure.
who disagree on different topics, sometimes it is. And don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying there isn't malice for people on the right and there isn't malice for people on the left. Obviously, that is the truth. But I think for the most part, we need to distinguish between differences of opinion and how and coming from a darker place. And I think those two things could live together, but oftentimes they don't. And I love that when we have the discussions, we actually are highlighting the fact that I think for most people, it doesn't come from a bad place.
Sure. Sure. Now we're going to get into the weeds here. So we're going to get into some topics, and people are going to hear us and how we have our conversations, because we do this from time to time, whether on the phone, in person, on the radio, or, whatever it is we're doing professionally. But talk about your recent documentary, because, you put a lot of effort into it, and I know that you want to share that. And, please.
Sure. So, yeah. So this documentary was in response to a lot of what people were saying about the conflict, the war in Gaza, and how Israel has executed that war. And I think it's and this is why this platform is so important, because you share an opinion that I don't really share when it comes to Israel. I think you and I have made some progress from both perspectives. I think you and I both mediated some of our views on this topic. But the crux of the video was is that there's a narrative going on that Israel essentially is committing genocide, and that Israel's intent is to harm civilians, that they are trying to wipe out the civilian population in Gaza. And this video, this documentary is a response to that, where I try to bring in experts, try to go there myself, go through data, because I think data ultimately is really important. I know a lot of people will say to me, well, data excludes dead children. Like, just because you say data, they're still dead children. I go, I get that emotional response, but ultimately war is war. And in order to come up to some kind of conclusion on whether or not this war is being prosecuted in the most ethical way possible. And I say most ethical way possible because Ramsey's war, is that quote by, I think it's by Patton, war is hell. And it is. War is a horrific human endeavor that is sometimes necessary, sometimes unnecessary. But in both cases, war is difficult and it's bloody and people are killed. Many people were killed who are not combatants. In fact, generally, when one engages in war, even if you're trying, even the most ethical armies in the history of the earth, let's say NATO, one would argue that Western European war is as ethical as one can make war. The vast majority of civilians the people are killed are still going to be civilians. It's the nature of war. So getting past the emotion, I wanted to get into some of the data to get a sense of, is Israel committing war crimes? As a matter of course, obviously, every army is going to commit a certain amount of war crimes. It's impossible because humans are involved, and you're going to have a certain amount of unethical behavior, right? Even some that account to war crimes.
Bad actors.
That doesn't mean, what's that?
Bad actors. So you're good.
Bad actors, for sure. That doesn't mean that the war itself is being prosecuted in an ethical way, right? As opposed to, let's say, Russia and the way Russia's prosecuting its war. Its entire war plan is war crimes. That's all it's trying to do. It's not trying to avoid civilians. It's trying to kill as many civilians as possible. I would argue that that's the entire intent of Hamas. Hamas isn't looking to never mind that's not trying to reduce the amount of Israeli civilian casualties, right? It's trying to kill as many Israeli civilians as possible. I would argue that Hamas is trying to kill and have as many of its own civilians killed as possible, because that's a propaganda win for them. So that's essentially the idea of this documentary. Okay,
one more time. What is the name of it?
The Art of War.
And where can people find it?
They can find it anywhere on YouTube.
Okay.
PragerU is one of the distributors of it. I knew I'd get a chuckle out of you on that. I knew it.
Yeah, that's an inside joke between Ami and myself. I'm not a fan of PragerU, and Ami is a fan of PragerU. But that's for another day. Okay. So let's get into it.
Yeah.
Ami, my brother. I was with my son today, and I knew we'd have this conversation. And yesterday, my son, he's 10 years old. He went and got his ears pierced. Okay. I know that's probably not a thing that, people do widely, but in our culture, that's a thing that we do. Right. So I took my little boy to get his ears pierced. He wanted his earrings. We got him done. And then I looked at him, and he's a young man. Right. So just like that. And I'm like taking it in that I get to watch my son grow up. And I know that I'm gonna have this conversation with you. And I know you're going to talk about your film, and we're going to talk about many other things. And I want you to talk about your film. When we were last together, I made a comment. Shooters are going to shoot, right? You're going to do what it is that you do. You're a journalist. You're a personality. You make content that is widely received, well received. And it brings a perspective to the common dialogue that has just as much a place as something I would bring. Okay. I famously will say that, hey, look, I have my own personal political biases. I think that the world should look this way. I think that people should behave this way. I think that we should be good to each other. And what I know to be good to each other differs from what other people, what their line is, right? So in that, I admit my bias. And for you to say that you're a conservative filmmaker, I think therein lies your conservative bias, right? Admitted conservative bias. These things are all really good to establish up front because these aren't hidden elements. These are things that, I'm being fully transparent. You've always been very transparent to me. While we're on the subject of Israel, one of the things that I might say in a conversation with you that I want our listeners to know, given what you've said, and I've actually seen your film, is that while I appreciate the additional perspective, that helps. That helps. A man that grew up with Jewish people, played with Jewish children when I was a child, taught Jewish children my culture, and was taught Jewish culture from Jewish friends of mine, some of whom are still my friends today. And along the way, we've grown and we've maintained friendships, and we've lost people along the way, and we've gained new family and new friends along the way, etc. The whole time knowing not much about Israel, but Jewish people have always had my heart. I would say to you, my brother, Ami Horowitz, that if I lived in a parallel universe, the moral stance that I have with respect to Palestine and Israel's response to Palestine, not Jewish people's response, but Israel's response to the people in Palestine, I believe it would be exactly the same if I lived in an alternate universe where Palestine was bombing people and they had every single justification and they were doing it as ethically as possible as they could. And everything was all buttoned up as much as they could make it, and they could pass inspection or take it to court and win, whatever. I would have the same response if I looked at the numbers and I saw that there were ultimately less Jewish children in the world as a result of a Palestinian campaign. Living in that reality for me would be unconscionable, and my reaction would be the same. And so the love that I have for Jewish people is for the people first, the culture second. And I recognize, and you and I had this conversation before, that there is a finite number of Jewish people. When I found that, I think you might have been the one that told me that it might have been like 16 million Jewish people on Earth, or some incredibly
a little less than that.
You see what I mean? What a small number, right? So human beings that value human beings that recognize our path, would recognize, oh, we're losing this precious group of people. And that is not the world that I want to live in. We need to be growing this group of people. These people are valuable and special and precious. And all of these narratives and all of these anti-Semitic comments and all these Kanye West people and the people that allow that to happen, all that sort of stuff, these Nazi salutes by these people on stages and whatever. That is the sort of thing I push back against. But I like to think that I would keep that same energy when it comes to Palestine. Just like if the roles were reversed, I'd keep that same energy if it was the nation state of Palestine that was taking out buildings and institutions and lives of Jewish people. And then where do we go from there? And everybody's okay with this. There's a stunning silence. And indeed, there's a documentary that comes out that provides some cover, which again, I understand, Ami. I do. I understand, because people need to be able to say their piece. What this society indeed is built on. You say what happened, I say what happened, and then there's a judge or an arbitrator or whoever that finds out what the truth will be. That will be chronicled, and we will move forward as a society based on that. So having the opposing narrative, I suppose, is valid. But the end result, the thing that you said, people's reaction is strongest when they're digesting that. The end result, I believe, is consistent with what I know to be human morality. In short, people, A, that don't have anything to do with this, and B, that are dying. It's so permanent. What will be Palestine on the other side of this? And again, when you reverse the roles, what would be Israel on the other side of a similar campaign in the hypothetical universe is where I find myself. So your response to that, we'll move to, I want to make sure I give you the last word as often as I can, but your response to that, we'll move to some other topics.
Look, what you said is part of the reason why I love you, because you do have a big heart. And I do believe that you would have the same response if the shoe was the other foot. I think you said I believe, because I know you, and you're honest. But my response to that is, we don't live in a perfect world. In fact, I would argue that the perfect is the enemy of the good. And every time we try to pursue perfection and saying, look, every life is precious. First of all, not every life is precious, right? Anyone who's a murderer or a killer, his life is less precious than an innocent person. Certainly, any innocent life is something that any good person mourns, right? And obviously, no one wants to have innocent lives, or not no one. Actually, that's part of the problem. Some do want innocent lives to be lost, but most good people, all good people, don't want innocent lives lost. And certainly, Israel doesn't want innocent lives lost, and it bothers them. There was a famous quote by Golda Meir. She was a prime minister of Israel, right? Female prime minister of Israel. And she had a number of very famous quotes. And one of her more famous ones were, the one thing I will never forgive the Palestinians for is making us kill their children. It's a powerful statement because it says two things. One is the fact that she, so in her bones, like most Israelis, do not want to kill Palestinian kids. But on the other hand, understands the reality of the situation that sometimes we're forced to, right? And that it bothers us to our bones. But that's the reality when we're facing war. There's also a famous saying in Israel, which is the moment all Palestinians put their weapons down is the moment we have peace in the region. And the moment Israel puts its weapons down is the moment we have genocide. I think there's a difference. There is a difference, an operating difference. The mantra of look, the truth is that this argument was left bare and open and obvious when the mantra of the Palestinian protesters in America and in Europe is from the river to the sea. And I don't want to wash that over saying, oh, it's just some kind of random statement. It's not. It's a very specific statement, which means they don't want self-determination of these people, of just the West Bank and Gaza. I'm for that. I'm for their self-determination. I want a healthy, strong Palestinian state that works with Israel, Palestinian people that works with Israel to make the region a better place. But when the river to the sea is a very specific concept. It is, we want to get rid of every Jew that lives between the Jordan River and the ocean and the sea, right? The Mediterranean Sea. And they want it cleansed of Jews. They want the Palestinian nation to take all of the land. And that's what Israel is fighting against. And yes, there have been innocent people who have died, and good people mourn that, and certainly I do. At the end of the day, we have to look at ultimately how it's conducting itself, and I would say it's conducting itself in a one of the most, if not the most ethical war we've seen in urban warfare.
Okay. I think that to a lot of people, I'm gonna back up to the same hypothetical here. And again, last word is yours, but if there was a version of this that we had to deal with where, let's say Ramses is the decider, I get to decide who lives and who dies, and there is a Palestinian person or a Jewish person, let's say a Jewish person, okay, who is a bad person, right? This Jewish person is attacking the world, right? This Jewish person is evil, the epitome of evil, just a bad apple, okay? And in order to get to that Jewish person, I had to shoot a bullet through the head of a Jewish little girl. Now, I could shoot through this little girl, hit that bad person, and rid the world of this evil. I'm safer, my children are safer, everyone's safer, right? But I have to shoot through this little Jewish girl's head. And then I'm telling myself that that's just the price of doing war. Sometimes you just have to eliminate people, and that's collateral damage. That's a very calloused way of looking at it. And that's what it feels like. And there are people, this is going to be a moral debate for all of the ages. But this is what I'm trying to say, where my line is. Because living in a world without that little Jewish girl is not worth living in a world without that evil Jewish man. Okay, give me 20 seconds, your response, okay, and then we'll move to another.
So fascinating, because it does get the crux of what we're talking about. And ultimately, is that a war crime, right? Is that a war crime? And there's very specific rules on what makes a war crime. And the truth is that the Geneva Convention says, if the person you're shooting, that evil Jewish person you're shooting, is going to kill more of your side than that one girl, that you have intelligence saying he is perpetrating more damage than that one death, according to the laws of war, you could do that. You could hit a school.
So that means according to the laws of Ami.
No, these are no, not at all.
So you agree with this law?
Look, yeah, I think that they're there for a reason. Yeah,
and for me, again, for me, that is unconscionable. So we'll leave that one. We'll leave that one right there because I
actually love that about you.
Well, let's leave it right there. Thank you for that. But I want to get to some other stuff because we got a lot to cover. All right. So let's bring it back home. According to some recent polls that I read, around 90% of Republicans approve of Donald Trump's current performance in office. So I want to get your thoughts. We don't have a lot of time because we talked a lot about that, but we'll come back to it if we need to. Most Republicans approve of Trump's performance. Talk to us about why that is and what Republicans are seeing that the rest of the world is missing, because outside of Republicans, not a lot of people are fans of what Donald Trump's doing. Not even Elon Musk as of late.
I didn't know that 90% number. I thought the number had come down a little bit recently, but yeah.
Maybe this is a little old because I planned on talking to you about this, but give me about 30 seconds.
Yeah. There's good Trump, bad Trump, right? This has been the story of Trump since the beginning. There's stuff about Trump that I love, that I think is great, that I think is helpful. And there's stuff about Trump that drives me insane. I don't like, I don't support. I think for most people in the country, frankly, it's a mixed bag. Look, Republicans are always going to support the Republican candidate, right? And the Republican president, and Democrats can support the Democratic president. I think, Joe Biden probably had a number similar to Trump. But ultimately, I think what people voted for was somebody who's going to come in and say, we're going to change the way things are done because what we have seen the last 4 years has not been good for the country. And I think he has changed things for good and for bad.
Okay. Well, giving that insight, I think that's going to set us up for the next part of the show. So stick around. We'll be right back.